Hello, Oracles. Well, earnings season is upon us, and I have decided that Netflix is cut off. They are no longer allowed to go first. They cannot be the line leader anymore. They have been leading in a terrible way the last 2 quarters. So as of right now, they are down 25% after hours, missing earnings. They are now down below the pandemic levels. When we hit the lows back when the pandemic first hit, they are below those levels. So when we saw this stuff coming out of Netflix back at the end of Q4, we saw they bottomed out, the market pulled down. The rest of our earnings season actually wasn't bad. We saw a little bit of green, but there was a succession of bull traps that just carried on for the next month and a half afterwards. Now, this is not to say that Netflix is the reason this all happened. There's a lot of other factors involved, but, we had a very similar pattern previously. We had the Fed minutes that came out in mid-January, saw a massive sell-off. We got the Netflix earnings, reinforced that sell-off, and continued to come down, saw the bull traps, and then we dropped to the bottom right around the beginning of March. So, are we going to see that again? We've got earnings season starting now. Netflix is down 25%. We've got Tesla coming out tomorrow. We've got the FOMC meeting coming up at the beginning of May. Are we going to see this same pattern? Again, we don't know. This time around, the FOMC meeting is significantly closer to the earnings. So last time we had earnings, and then it was a month and a half before we had the FOMC meeting. This time around, FOMC meeting is basically right at the tail end of tech earnings. So, we might not see it as bad. This time around, we have a lot more insight as far as what the Fed is planning on doing for their rate hikes. So there's different information we have this time around. So how it's going to play out, I truly don't know. I think the next 2 weeks could realistically go either way. We could either have a great run, we could have a massive sell-off, or we can just stay flat. It's really up in the air. Very low volume trading today again. Yesterday was the end of tax season, so that's all over. So perhaps that was why we were very green today. We're up over 2% in the NASDAQ, so that was really nice to see. The SPY was also up 1.5%. So we saw a little bit of an uptick today across the board. We've been kind of trading sideways for the last week. So are we going to continue this uptrend, or is this going to be another one of those fake outs and a bull trap, and we're going to have the bottom fall out? So I think Tesla earnings tomorrow are going to be a big signal as well. So if Tesla does show good earnings, because they have shown over the last year and a half with all of the supply chain issues that they have overcome those issues better than everybody else. So if Tesla for some reason shows a weakness to the supply chain, I think that could be a very bad sign for the market. We've seen that Tesla has overcome that. Tesla historically does sell off after earnings regardless of how good the numbers are. So again, I don't know which way we're going to move after this. The way I normally play earnings is if there is a stock that I am interested in, I will buy it if it comes down after the earnings. So I take a look at the fundamentals. Obviously, even if it's a great company that I like, but fundamentally they show weakness in their earnings call, I'm not going to buy in. But if they show a good earnings and they sell off afterwards, that is a very good signal for me to buy. I had mentioned it yesterday, and when I go into earnings, I don't like to buy ahead of time. Very, very rarely will I buy ahead of time. Way too many things can happen going into earnings. You can go into it, you can have a run up into earnings and then it continues to run afterwards. Or the bottom can fall out. Or you're thinking, well, it didn't run up into earnings, maybe it'll take off after earnings. They have great numbers, great forecast, great everything across the board, and the stock sells off anyway. So many different things can happen after earnings. I do not like to play that game. It really is a coin flip gamble in my eyes. I also don't like to hold stocks as far as, if there's a stock that I do want to get out of and I'm waiting for earnings to see what's going to happen, I don't like to hold it through it just in case. If I'm looking to get rid of it, if I get an opportunity to get out, I will get out ahead of time. I like to try and make my decisions at least a week before earnings. and I'll say, hey, if it runs up into earnings and I get to a point where I want to sell it, I'll just sell it and not gamble with what's going to happen on earnings day. For me, it's just not anything like that. If it's just something I'm playing long term, I'm just going to hold through it and let whatever happen. But when it comes to adding the stock, I like to make my decision afterwards. Normally, a reaction to a stock earnings is always overblown. You will always get an overreaction to the stock after earnings. For instance, Netflix is selling off massively right now. There's a good chance in the next 3 days that it's either going to sell down a little bit more or rebound off the bottom that we see in after hours. After hours is low volume, so usually the movement in the stock is exaggerated as well. So if you do have a stock, like for instance, let's say Tesla tomorrow comes out with earnings and it drops. When it hits a bottom, that might be a great time to buy because a lot of times you get that over exaggeration in after hours. So those are the times I would like to buy in. There is a 3-day rule when it comes to earnings. Usually 3 days after earnings, you don't want to make any moves in the stock unless it is because it sold off after good earnings and you want to buy in low. That is really the only way that I will react to a stock and make a move on it within that 3-day window. Otherwise, I wait and feel it out and see what's going to happen. You've got the earnings call to go through. The company comes out with their 8K, so you can go through all of the information. And the 8K will give you a further deep dive into what the company had to say about what is going on for that quarter. So a lot of times we wait for that information to come out before we make any decisions. That's why a lot of times you'll see some analysts will give out new price targets ahead of earnings, and that is usually a very bullish sign. Sometimes they give it right after earnings, and then many of them will wait for that 8K to get filed before they come out with their new price targets. And I think we're going to get a lot of good information out of this earnings season as far as how inflation has affected all of these companies, how have their costs been, what are supply chain issues that they are still facing, what are their forecasts. Forecasts for the last 2 years have been vital to how the stocks have traded and reacted to earnings. Because if they don't give a forecast at all, that just means that they don't know what's going on. But recently we have seen some companies giving forecasts again, and some have been lower. So forecasting right now is very important. I think when it comes to Tesla tomorrow, Q2 they might forecast a little bit down due to Shanghai being closed for as long as they were. But I have a feeling they're still going to be giving us hey, we're still looking at a 50% growth year over year by the end of this year. And I think their long-term forecast is going to be just a reiteration of what we have been hearing. And now with Netflix falling after hours due to earnings, we did see Disney pull back as well because of, Disney Plus being a streaming service. That one came down. Tesla did pull down a little bit as well. So I have a feeling we are going to see a NASDAQ gap down tomorrow. Don't know if we're going to see it in the S&P, but we'll probably see a little bit of a gap down tomorrow, which might actually lead to a red in the morning day and then perhaps green in the afternoon leading up to Tesla's earnings. Tomorrow's going to be kind of iffy. We'll see how it plays out. There was a big gap down that we saw in Q1 or at the end of Q4 when Netflix had their earnings then. So again, we did see that, and it was a couple of days of red, and then it came back green, and earnings season really was more sideways than anything else. So again, we've got to weigh this out. Not sure. I'm just kind of sitting here. Again, volume was very low, so it tells me that a lot of people are still sitting on the sidelines just waiting to see what is happening when it comes to earnings season. And one key signal that I took away from the Netflix earnings is the fact that they are down another 25% after these earnings. Normally, after earnings, you don't see moves that large, especially with companies of that size. So for me, I'm looking at this as we are still in a very volatile market with low volume because that's what's pulling it down so hard so fast. One thing that we had discussed back in December was the FAANG stocks. This is Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. Netflix right now, after 2 quarters of earnings, have shown that they might actually not really be a FAANG stock anymore. And again, we talked about it in December where FAANG stocks aren't always FAANG stocks. You go back 20 years, most of these companies didn't even exist. So that's where we're at now, and Tesla is definitely moving its way into the FAANG stock territory. So let me know in the comments below what you think the new FAANG stocks are going to be in the next decade, because I think Netflix is falling out of it very quickly, and I definitely see they are going to be the first ones that are being removed from the top plays that we should be in. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate all of your support and feedback. If you have not subscribed, please do so down below. Sign yourself up for notifications. I am over on Twitter at OracleTim1. I share all of the latest Tesla news, pertinent stock market information, and all of my daily trades. Thank you so much. Have a great one.